Letting go is truly one of the most powerful practices that you can do and will truly help to set you free. So many people are holding on to so many different things that if they were just to give themselves the self-love and the space to release would help them elevate so much in their lives, not even mentioning their state of being and the way that they're going to feel. Now, one of the things that really prevents people from being able to let go effectively is a lot of people actually think it's very difficult when you could also think it's very easy and experience one or the other. I've mentioned this in other videos, but a lot of times what you believe is what's going to come about. And so if you believe it's insanely hard to let go, well, it's going to be insanely hard. I've even heard people say it's impossible, right? Well, then it will be made impossible because you're creating that in your life. But I've also, on the other end of the spectrum, seen people have been like, letting go is easy. And I've seen them let go easily. In fact, I'm one of these people where I created the belief that letting go, doing these techniques and releasing things from my life is easy. And I found as a result, it's been very easy to release things, even things I've been holding on to for a very long time. Releasing them didn't take that much time at all when I applied some of the things I'm going to give you in this video. In fact, I'm already giving you one right now, is to work on that limited belief of believing this is hard. Again, anything you think is going to be difficult, you are creating more hills for you to climb when it comes to this thing. And so in this video, I want to give you some of the things that are going to make letting go easy, even when you think it's very, very difficult. Some of these things I use, and some of these are tools we give like paid clients in our EMF program that are just magical at helping you able to shift the energy, to shift your perspective, so that even in a time when you think it's very difficult to let go, you can actually make it easy. And I've used these things, for example, in times when it just seemed like something wouldn't leave or wouldn't be let go of, and I was just making it like really hard on myself because it was something I put a lot of importance on. But then I used some of the things I'm going to give you today, and it made it just so much easier, even though this thing was such a heavy thing in my life, and it's happened more than once. But then I'll use some of these tools. So let's jump into what these are. I've got 5 different ideas and tools for you that are going to help you with this magical process of letting go. And again, having worked with people at a very high level, having taken people through, very high level programs like 6-month transformation programs, I've seen the power of people who truly commit to letting go, who get guided in this, who use some of the tools I'm going to give you today, and it just produces magic in people's lives when they apply it. So let's jump into it. Now, number 5, we're going in reverse order with number 5, and that's awareness of your attachments and your distractions. And this is so crucial because if you're not aware of what it is that you keep attaching yourself to or distracting yourself with that's preventing you from feeling what you need to feel, then you're going to have a really hard time. But when you become aware, actually every time this emotion tries to come up for me to feel it, I go to my phone and watch YouTube or go on Instagram, or I go talk to that person who keeps me in like a negative state, or I go and eat a bunch of junk food, right? Or I go watch Netflix, or I go try and seek validation from this particular person, and this particular person always is ready to give me that validation, right? When you understand what those are, it makes it easier to not distract yourself, because we all have go-tos. And you may have noticed this, maybe you felt a little bit of pressure, maybe you felt a certain emotion coming up, and understand if an emotion is coming up, it wants to be felt. It's in you, and it's trying to come up so it can be felt, so it can be acknowledged, so we can shine the light on, and so it can be let go of and be transcended. These emotions weren't meant, designed to be stuck in our bodies. They were meant to run their course very quickly. If you look in nature, for example, when an animal has like a bunch of fear or whatever else, you can look at a deer, for example. Let's say a predator is chasing it, and it's just running, and let's say it escapes the predator. You'll notice them like kind of shake for a little bit, or they'll kind of like be in this like kind of removing the energy state. And then they just go 2 minutes later back to whatever they were doing. They go back to grazing, and they've forgotten about it. They don't store that energy or information. They literally shake off the energy and let go of it. And for us, because we have the prefrontal cortex, because we think of all these different things, because we don't know how to handle fear in this day and age when we don't have to worry about the tiger and we put it on all these other things, we tend to hold on to things. And you're not going to be able to transcend that emotion until you feel it, until you do the equivalent of the shaking that the deer does. I've seen ducks do it too. Animals in nature just do this naturally and instinctively. And we have that ability, the emotion's trying to come up to be felt, but then we go to one of our attachments or one of our distractions in order to not have to feel that emotion. And again, you have to feel it to heal it. Remember, what you resist persists. So this emotion's coming up. The distraction, the attachment is a form of resistance, of you going unconsciously, usually, I don't want to deal with this, so I'm just going to go on YouTube. Or I don't want to deal with this, so I'm going to go talk with that person who I know unconsciously will distract me. Or I don't want to deal with this, so I'll go put all this importance on this other thing, right? And so list out, what are those? What are the things you jump to? And again, you have to be honest with this. You know, for me, I know what mine are. I like to go onto YouTube and watch random videos. And I'm getting better at this because I have this awareness in my head now, in my awareness, that don't go and watch YouTube when you're starting to feel some heaviness and something you need to transcend. And now what I try and do is one of the techniques I'm going to give you in this video to actually help you to release things. And it's also especially important, not just distractions, but to know what attachments you have. And attachments essentially mean you're giving something outside of you all of this importance. This takes the form usually of a person. This might take the form of even money or other things that you put all this importance outside of you. And just understand that that is also used a lot of times as a distraction to experiencing what it is you need to experience. You're giving all this importance, like basically you're giving someone the power of your happiness over to someone or to something. You're saying, if this is a certain way, I won't be happy, etc., etc. And remembering that our outside world is always a reflection of our inner world, meaning that there are emotions and certain things that you haven't dealt with that are causing you to go attached to all these things outside of you because you're looking for like a reprieve, you're looking for like a break, you're looking for love and happiness outside of you. And the letting go process is going to help you to break some of these attachments as well, but it's also important we know what that is. So if you are attached to a person, you give all this importance to a certain person in your life, just be aware of that so you can work with that moving forward. If you give it to a thing, for example, maybe you really have a car that you put all this importance onto it, and if something happened to it, you know, it would ruin your life or whatever. Maybe it's a job. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's anything outside of you that you have an attachment to, anything outside of you that distracts you, take note of that. Be aware of that, because that's going to be crucial to not go into that thing when it's time to feel something out. Now, number 4 is a very powerful tool that we go deep with our clients, but I'm going to explain kind of the general idea behind it right here. And this is what we call removing the story. One of the things that makes it so hard to let go is we amplify the energy by repeating it over and over again of the story of whatever happened. So let's say someone did something to you that, you know, let's say they took advantage of you, and we create this whole story around it about why that is, and I keep attracting this kind of person, and this thing in the past happened which led to this, which led to that, and then you lead to more. It's ruining my life, and you're creating all of this stuff that actually isn't true, but you're creating meaning around. And you have to remember, we are meaning creating machines. Someone can have the exact same situation happen to them, I mean almost exactly the same, and derive a completely different meaning, which means they create a completely different story, which means they have a completely different context around that event. You could have two people have the exact same event happen to them. Actually, let me give you a good example from my own life. I had a near-death experience 4 or 5 years ago now. I think 5 years ago now. Wow. 5 years ago, I had a near-death experience. And when I shared the video of the near-death experience, there were people who told me their stories about theirs, you know, kind of having a similar experience to me, where at the end of the day, the experience was insanely empowering. And actually, you know, again, if you haven't heard about it, this being came to me and filled me with unconditional love, and it was amazing. But then I also heard stories of people who had a similar experience where it was insanely traumatic, right? Where you're on the brink of death, and because you're in this fear-based place, that's insanely traumatic. Your worst fear was almost realized. Yet the same thing happened to us, maybe in slightly different ways, but we held them completely differently. Now, does that mean that, you know, that these things are completely different? No, an event is just an event, but we attached completely different meanings to the event. Right? So one person can go through that and find it as an insanely empowering experience that's helped them on their journey of growth. Another person can take it and be like, I told you, life is full of suffering, life is traumatic, life is just full of misery, I almost died, look at this. The same event happened, but it's held completely differently. Different meaning was created around the event. And so an amazing way to discharge the meaning you have put around an event that you are considering either traumatic or something you're struggling to let go of is to remember that an event is just an event. And the way to look at this is, how do you describe what happens in the shortest amount of words possible? So if I take my near-death experience, and even though I have a positive spin on it, and it was a very positive experience for me, if I was to do this exercise so that I could even put that positive spin on it in the first place, I would go, I was on a motorbike and I crashed into a wall. I crashed the motorbike into the wall. That was the event, right? That's it. Everything from that point on is meaning that I have created. I could create that that was terrible. I could create that that led to the amazing things that happened next that led to this incredible life-changing event in my life, right? But an event is just an event. And when you do it that way, say someone takes advantage of you, you don't even say the word advantage. Let's say someone took money from you, right? You would say, whatever person, so name of person, took money from me in the shortest amount of words. And what you're doing is you're removing the energy of the story attached to whatever happened, taking a step back, and then able to ask yourself the question, how do I actually want to hold this? How would it serve me to hold this story? Because again, you can attach any meaning you want to it. But by taking that step back, being calm and grounded while looking at that event as just an event, we start to dissipate the energy a little bit and start to make the decision on how we want to hold this event. We may want to just let go of it and hold it in no regard and just make it neutral. We may want to attach some positive thing. Like, I learned a very powerful lesson that day about boundaries. And I actually see that as an amazing event in my life because it taught me the power of boundaries. And now I've done certain things so that that kind of event never happens again. But if it hadn't happened, I wouldn't have come to that realization. You see how that's a much more empowering story or meaning created around it than, this person stole from me or whatever the situation is, and it's the worst thing ever, and this always happens to me. It's all, why me? Why does God seem to hate me? Is there even a God? I think this is an unfriendly universe, and it can spiral out of control into this story that leads to another story that leads to another story, even though at the end of the day, it's all emanating from a singular event that you could actually describe in maybe 5 words. And when you actually do that, you create this separation where you see that you can create whatever meaning around it, or no meaning if you choose, to whatever it is. And when you remove the story from this event, you can then feel out the pure energy from the event, right? You can feel out what is in your body that makes you want to create a story that's negative or whatever it is around this event. So you go, I have a lot of anger in me, and that's why, and that event triggered that anger, and that's why I want to create this angry story mixed with guilt and shame and grief and whatever else into this event. Right? Because whatever's going on inside of you is going to be what you color the world with if you don't take this step back, right? There was something that I think it was Wayne Dyer said, what do you get when you squeeze an orange, right? And then people were like, orange juice, all this different stuff. He said, no, you get whatever is inside. So when pressure is applied to you, if you squeeze an orange, you get orange juice. Why? Because that's what's inside. So if pressure is applied to you, an event happens for you, and you create all this certain meaning around it, why is that? Because that was what was inside. This pressure that's inside of you built up, and then you projected it onto whatever that thing was, right? So let's say you have a lot of anger that you need to release, but you haven't. An event happens, then it's unsurprising that you create an angry story around that event. So does that make sense? For us to be able to make this easier, take away that drama, that energization through the story. And remember that an event is just an event. Describe it in the fewest amount of words you can, and then move forward with it. Number 3 is to monitor your self-talk and language. And I know you've heard of this one before, but so many people shoot themselves in the foot when it comes to letting go and make it so difficult because they say things that they're also thinking that are giving their power away. Like they're giving their power to someone else. Like, this person they just know how to control me. They just know how to make sure I never have a good life. This person is preventing me from living the life I want to live. This person is suppressing me from being who I want to be. And just hear the power you are giving away when you are saying these things. Like you are giving this person the right to control you, not because they in like a vacuum could or would, but because you are giving your power to them. You are giving them permission to come in and, well, do what it is they're going to do, right? I know you've heard of the idea that like kind of people who are more doormats attract people who take advantage, right? Because that energetic almost invitation for someone to come in and take advantage of you, right? And if you're giving your power all the way, you're saying these words and they're pretty automatic, it means there's a feeling inside of you that thinks that's okay. There's emotions inside of you, maybe guilt and shame, where you believe that's what should be, right? And even though you might complain about it and verbalize it, that's inside of you somewhere, right? So be very clear on your self-talk and what you're saying. Now, what I'm not saying is you need to change your self-talk right away or resist this. What I'm saying is use this so that you can start to understand what's going on within you. Because again, the outer reflects the inner. If you're starting to speak certain things, you're even starting to notice certain energies coming your way, it's because in some way your inner world has been creating that through the emotions you've been holding on to. And so this gives you a good idea of what's going on, what needs to be released, so you can actually start releasing it. it. Now, at the end of the day, you don't need to know exactly the name of the emotion and all this different stuff. It can just help, because if you start talking in a way that's very negative towards yourself, it's just an indicator, oh, okay, there's some things within me that are causing this to be the case. There's something I'm holding on to that's causing me to speak in this way, an old story, some kind of limitation, whatever it is. So it kind of gives you more of an indicator that there are things to be released. And then as you start releasing these things, you may start to notice that you speak a little more highly of yourself. You stop giving your power away so much. But if you notice that that's happening, and you just kind of, again, have that awareness and take a step back and be like, why am I saying I can't do this? Why am I saying this person's better than me? Why am I saying X, Y, and Z? And it's a good place to start to ask better questions to see that, oh, okay, there are things for me to release. I need to maybe put a little more attention on doing these things. Again, it's just a great reflection of what's happening on the inside. And at the end of the day, is your self-talk something that's disempowering you, or is it something that's empowering you, and it's 100% representative of something that's going on within you? Now, number 2 is another tool that we give our EMF students. And again, if you want to learn more about EMF and kind of work with us through letting go and just full transformation, you can take a look at the first link in the description. It gives a case study and kind of a free training about EMF, what we do, why it works, all that fun stuff. But this is one of the tools we give in one of the modules, in one of the modules that has to do with mastering emotions. So we go over letting go and then also how to master your emotions in multiple different ways. So what we do is called the shifting perspective tool. And I'm just going to give you it very quickly so you can use it if you wish or just have a go at it. But it's essentially understanding that when we are at the perspective of the thing happening, it's easier for us to get hooked into it. And so the analogy we give is we have, let's say it's a football match, so soccer for me, but let's just say it's any kind of sporting event, right? And you can insert any one that makes more sense for you. I'm going to use soccer because that's the one I play and makes the most sense. So let's say it's soccer. I might say football because I call it that a lot, but there's a soccer match happening. Now, if you're the player that's on the field playing, you have a much different level of concern about the game that's happening than, say, someone else. So let's say you're on the pitch and you get tackled and, like in soccer, if you've played, you get some studs right on your shin or something. Well, that hurts. And so your current level of involvement with the game is at the level of this hurts, your reaction, you're really into the emotions of the game, right? So with me so far. Now, if we shift the perspective to, say, the coach of one of the teams, they're still pretty involved in the game, but the way they think about the game is very different. So they see their player maybe injured. They don't think like, oh, pain, there's so much pain going on, oh my God, if you've ever played a sport and you've been injured, the coach isn't feeling your pain. The coach is thinking more, okay, it looks like David's hurt. Okay, maybe I should get a substitution ready. Maybe I should see if Ralph or whoever on the bench should get ready to warm up, and maybe I need to take him off. Is he okay? Do I need to change my tactics with the game to kind of accommodate bringing on this next sub? So it's a different level of thought altogether. Then we chunk up one more and we go to the audience, so the spectator. Let's say this game's been playing in the stadium. So then the people watching the game, is their perspective very different? Yeah, they're seeing the action, they're roaring, they're cheering, they're booing, they're getting all emotional about it, but for completely different reasons. They see the player getting tackled and they cheer for their team, or maybe if it's my fans on it, they're going like, oh, that's a foul, ref, what are you doing, right? So a completely different level of association to what's happening in the game. Then let's chunk up even more to the people in the VIP kind of boxes, what do you call them, the box seats, right? They're just kind of up there eating their food, they're kind of leisurely watching the game, but it's a completely different perspective. They're not even as tuned into the game. It's not affecting them as much. They're not getting as emotionally attached into the game. Some of them up there are watching the game, their team's playing, whatever else it is, but it's a completely different perspective once again. Now let's chunk up even more, and let's say we're on the helicopter that's filming the game from above with that kind of overview shot. Do you think the person filming that game is hooked into the emotions, or are they looking at it more of an overview? So the player that got injured, so let's say I'm gotten hurt in the field, they're not even registering that. They're just focused on having an overview of the game. Now, the reason we give this example is apply this to any situation that you're in, and you'll understand that most times, for people who don't do this work quite often, we're usually the player. And so because we're coming from the player view of getting, say, whacked in the foot or whatever the equivalent is, we get very emotional about the situation. Actually, someone who plays a lot of football, if you get kicked or hit or you think something unfair has happened, it's sometimes very hard to not get hooked in. Even though I do a lot of this work, if I don't take a step back in that moment, I get hooked in. I'm like maybe cursing out my opposition. I'm yelling at the ref sometimes, right? But if we chunk up and go to the position of the coach and we come from that perspective, doesn't how we react change? Absolutely. If we then chunk up even more to that of the audience, doesn't it change even more? Absolutely. If we go up to the box seats, does it change? Absolutely. And if we go up to the helicopter, does it change even more? Absolutely. And so the way you look at it, from the perspective you look at it, can change how you emotionally react to whatever it is. And so if you find yourself getting really hooked into a situation, you can take a step back and recognize, okay, I'm being the player in this situation because, and so it feels very real. It feels very much like this is very painful, but maybe I need to chunk up. Okay, what would the coach think, right? So what would the person who's kind of moving the chess pieces think? What would the person in the audience think? What would the person in the VIP box seat think? And what would the people in the helicopter think? And then you can just start to choose to look at it from the frame of the one that is most helpful for you in the situation. So does that make sense? Now again, this is something that's going to be very practical. So you will feel the effects of this when you actually use it, right? But I've had clients go through this and use this multiple times, and they're astounded by how helpful it is because it seems so simple. But when you simply shift the perspective to one of those different areas, you chunk up to a higher level of perspective, it really starts to dissipate the energy. You move beyond the energy of you getting hooked into it, and you're able to see it more in a vacuum without kind of attaching yourself to it. This is a great actually example of being able to detach yourself from the event that's happening and not create all this story, which leads to more story. And have you ever noticed that? You create some story around something, which creates another story based on that story, and you have all these mini stories, and it's just now this huge ball of energy that you've created, all emanating from this singular event that happened. And so this is an incredibly powerful tool that we, again, go deep with our clients in. I want to give it to you so you can at least start off with it. And it gets easier the more you use it, but just shifting the perspective is so powerful in the letting go process. And number one is to use a tool that works for you and to stay in the room. Now, some of these things I've given you to neutralize energy, to give yourself the opportunity to not continually pick things up. Because letting go is not just about removing or allowing things to be released that you've picked up already, but in my eyes, it's also knowing how to not continually pick things up. Because let's say you release and then you just equally pick up every single day more and more things because you're completely reactionary, you're creating all these stories, you don't know how to shift perspective and look at it differently, you're constantly getting hooked in to everything that's happening around you. And if you're like that, you will never cease to be hooked in and continually pick up things powerfully in a negative way that are not going to serve you. So that's what all these shifting of perspective things are, but we also need to be able to release and remove the pressure from the things that have already been building up inside of us. And so there's many tools to do this. Now, two that I always go over that I find very powerful are the Ho'oponopono meditation. You can look up what that is. It's very simple to do, but it works phenomenally well. And the Hawkins technique, David Hawkins, who literally wrote the book on letting go called Letting Go, where he told you to kind of just observe the energy and let it be. And so you don't you ignore the thoughts that are coming in. Again, that's just the story. You might be angry, and then this story comes up if you're angry at your parents or you're angry at this friend because they did X, Y, and Z. So that can be there, but you just disassociate from that. And essentially, you just put your focus on the energy. Because understand, this energy, this pure energy of whatever the emotion is in your body because you haven't felt it, you haven't shown the light on it. And so let's say it's showing up physically somewhere in your body. Let's say it's in your heart and there's a ton of sadness, because I've had this one happen before. And so instead of going like, I'm creating some story like, oh, I'm sad because this thing happened last week, or this person was mean to me, or et cetera, and that reminds me of another time when this person was mean to me. And I think it goes back to my childhood trauma of this. Remove the story, and even if the story comes up, just don't get hooked into it, right? And just feel the emotion. Just put a shining light on whatever it is. And maybe you will cry, maybe there'll be a release. You might find yourself kind of doing this, sorry if that really made the mic go weird, but you may find you're doing these things, which is a good sign that you're starting to release it. And ultimately, you're just going to observe the emotion and stay with it, to stay in the room no matter how uncomfortable it feels. Because understand, the problem or the reason you've been holding on to this is because once it got a little uncomfortable, you went to your attachment, you went to your distraction, you went to your story, which also serves as a distraction and sometimes an amplifier of the emotion or energy, right? And so if you just sit with it and just allow it, it will leave on its own accord. And you might find that it transforms into another energy. For example, it might be guilt, which is one of the lowest energies we can be in, and it transforms and actually increases to anger, which is actually a step up. And then you just sit with that emotion too, and now it's actually moved maybe to your stomach, and it's in like your solar plexus, and you just stay with that and you observe the energy. Now, one thing I want to mention, it's not actually important what energy it is. You will feel it. There will be a physical feeling in your body that you can feel. Sometimes when you get really good at this, it might be in your energy body, which goes beyond just your physical, but that's for another video. But ultimately, just feel wherever it is. It might be in your knee, it might be in your back, and just to observe it and stay with it. Stay in the room. This is something that's wanted to be seen for so long. And so some will take a little longer than others, and some will be very short. It might have been something you picked up that day, and it takes seconds. I've had things I've picked up, certain stressful things or whatever, that I've been able to remove in mere seconds because I picked it up that day, but then allowed myself to let go of it. And so instead of it building into this massive thing, I was able to remove it pretty quickly. And that's the last thing I want to leave you with, is don't use this as a thing you use when things have built up to such a point that it's almost like your last resort. I would actually invite you to do some form of letting go, and this is what Hawkins recommends as well, every single day. Because the reason this is so difficult in the beginning is because you may have not been doing this and years of buildup has happened. And so every time you do the letting go technique, some of that pressure is released. But if you've built up a lot of pressure, it sometimes just takes a bit longer. So if you have this huge energy ball, say anger or guilt or sadness, it's going to take a little bit more for that to happen. But if you do it every single day, and let's say you clear out pretty much everything, well, don't stop doing the letting go technique, because you're just going to build that up again if you don't have some way of letting go and releasing that pressure. And so my last invitation for you would be to make sure you're doing this daily. I do the Hawkins technique and sometimes Ho'opono every single day. I do the Hawkins technique every day, and sometimes I mix in the Ho'opono meditation. And I found that just things are so much smoother in my life. Things get released so quickly now, because every single day, because it's the nature of our world, we pick up things, and it allows me to just every single day release the pressure and not allow it to build up into this huge thing. Now again, if you are really looking to transform your life and you're not interested in more information, you're actually interested in transformation, I have a free training about our EMF program you can look at down below. This is as an amazing actually presentation and actually free training you can look at that also gives you some more information about our EMF program that has helped so many people. You can also see some of the results that people have gotten. So if you're really looking to transform your life, to work with us, to get some guidance, some of the best guidance you can possibly get on this journey, go look at that down below. Now, that's really all I have for you today. If you do want another video on letting go and shadow work, you can check this one out here, and I'll see you over there.